Hey friends, welcome and or welcome back to my channel. I'm Adanna, and if you're new here, on this channel we talk about all things stories and self-care. So that's books that we love, books that we want to read, authors that we love, and self-care. If you are new and you haven't subscribed already and you're interested in that sort of content, definitely subscribe down below and also hit the notification bell so that you're notified of every single time that I upload. And if you are returning, if you're not new here, you're not new to this, you're true to this, welcome back, friend. It's so good to see you. Today, I am super excited because we are at the end of the year and the end of the quarter. And so, that means that I am going to be doing a quarterly wrap-up of all of the books that I read in October, November, and December. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So in the month of October, I read 4 books, and that comes out to about 1 book a week. I had some okay books for the most part, and then I had some flops. So the first book that I read in October is Felix Ever After by Kason Kellender. This is a book about a young transgender teen named Felix Love, and he has never been in love. And yes, he is aware of the painful irony. He is transgendered, and so he's never really truly had the opportunity to be in a relationship. He was figuring out his own sexuality and his own gender identity. We find him in high school, and he is struggling with this newfound identity. He desperately wants to know what love feels like, and he wants to find someone for him. Then all of a sudden, he starts to get these homophobic or transphobic messages from an anonymous source, and he's really trying to figure out who it is. He also then, unfortunately, has an incident where there is a student gallery and someone has found pictures of his former identity and have posted them in this student gallery. And he is mortified, and that is a horrible situation for anyone to go through. So then he comes up with a plot to be able to find this person, whoever this is that is sending these texts and has also set up this gallery. What he didn't think would happen is he would end up falling into a love triangle with someone you see it coming, and then someone you don't expect. He has a lot of feelings that he needs to navigate, and it is a beautiful story about identity, gender identity, and honestly love. The next book that I read in October is Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Ayimide. I've actually done a video with a full in-depth review of this book, so if you haven't checked that out already, definitely check it up in the cards. I'll have that linked up in the cards and also down below. But it is essentially a thriller about two young teens that are in this school called Nebius Academy. So then in the story, we are following Chiamaka and Devin, and there is someone that is texting them and sending anonymous information out there that is detrimental to them, that they don't want to get out, and it seems like someone is really out to get them. This is a story that plays on that Get Out / Gossip Girl type of story, and I just truly loved it. I love the fact that it was super fast-paced. We don't know exactly what's going on or who's doing it, but we do know that these 2 main characters are trying to figure out who the hell is out to get them. The next book that I read in October is White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a psychological thriller about a young teen and her family. She ends up moving from her hometown in California to this quiet, seems like suburban ideal place, and I believe in Ohio. And come to find out, the place that she lives in, the town that she lives in, is haunted. So much so that things like household items go missing, they hear hushed voices, there's like this weird foul smell that keeps permeating and coming from the vents. It is wild. And our main character, Mari, comes to find out that it's not just unique to this particular house, it's this whole town. And it is a very interesting play on the neighbors are out to get me, something is wrong, everything seems perfect, but it actually, don't believe the hype. Everything you see, everything that glitters ain't gold. So a really interesting psychological thriller, and a first attempt at a thriller from Tiffany D. Jackson. So the next book that I read in October is Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. And I will say, this is literally the strangest book I have ever read in definitely all of this year, but probably all of my life. I'm still trying to understand what this story is about. From what I read, this is about 2 young women, Lillian and Madison, who ended up going to high school together. Lillian was on the wrong side of the tracks. Madison grew up in a well-to-do family, and they both had the opportunity to go to this well-respected school. Lillian gets a scholarship to go there. Madison obviously has the family that can support that dream of hers, or that goal of hers, to be able to go to school. Something ends up happening in high school where Lillian takes the fall for Madison. Unfortunately, Lillian then does end up getting kicked out, and they somehow still keep in touch after they graduate and after they move on with their lives. I believe 10 years later, Madison ends up asking Lillian for a favor, for her to come to Tennessee, where Madison lives, and to be the caretaker of 2 of her stepchildren. The only problem is there's something wrong with these children, like incredibly wrong. These people, these young humans, end up catching on fire for reasons that I'm still not quite sure about. But they end up catching on fire, and Lillian has to figure out how to keep them calm and how to make sure that they don't burn down the house because their father, which is Madison's husband, is trying to run for, I believe, senator, or he's running for like vice president or something like that. They need to be able to optically not make a mess and not make things hard for their father. And somehow Lillian agrees to do this, and we just see how, heartwarmingly, Lillian ends up being enamored by these children and wants to, continue that relationship with them. So it was a great feel-good story. I just don't understand why Lillian stayed in touch, why these children ended up on fire. Again, why these children ended up on fire. I'm just so confused. But it was a book that I read, and so I'm telling y'all about it. So in terms of the range of ratings, I had a very wide range. I had some books that I loved, and I had some books that I didn't love so much. The highest rated book in the month of October for me was, of course, no surprise, Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Ayimide. I thought that, again, for a debut novel, this was a beautifully written thriller. It had everything that I like in a thriller. It's more of a young adult, so it's a little bit more on the young side, but still, for the thriller category, I loved it, and I thought that it was well done. And so that was my highest rated book of October. My lowest rated book of October, unfortunately, was White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. I had a lot of questions in this book. I rated it a 2 out of 5 stars, and I thought that there were some parts of the story that were not well developed. There were a lot of questions that were left unanswered. There was some miss of the mark in terms of character development. And so, unfortunately, that was my lowest rated book of the month. And I'm surprised that it wasn't the one where the kids catch on fire. But Nothing to See Here was rated technically a 3 out of 5 stars because I did like how it wrapped up, versus White Smoke, I just hated the end. And I rated that a 2.5 out of 5 stars. So in the month of November, I ended up only being able to read 3 books. One of them I really liked, one of them I really didn't care for, and then the other one was kind of sort of in the middle. The first book that I read is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is my first time actually finishing a piece of work from N.K. Jemisin, and I truly loved it. I thought that as a science fiction fantasy novel, it really truly had all of the stuff that I love in that sort of a book. It had world building, we had a nice twist of misdirection in terms of characters, we had great dual timelines, overlapping timelines, and we really truly were able to see ourselves in many of these different characters, or at least I was. The way the ending was written, it left a lot of doors open. It's the first of a trilogy, so I appreciated that it left some things open and we can explore those in the rest of the trilogy, but we still had some questions that were answered and we found ourselves just kind of lost in this book. So I really truly enjoyed reading The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. The next book that I read in November is Behold the Dreamers by Mbolo Imbu. And for this book, I also have an in-depth book review that I have recently done, and I'll link that in the cards above and also in the description down below. Essentially, it is that first generation immigrant story where we have someone, I believe his name is Jende, who has immigrated from Cameroon to America during right before the height of the financial crisis of 2007, 2008. And we're seeing how he is struggling to make it in this country, in New York City, a notoriously hard city to just live in, even for American citizens, but especially so for immigrants. We are seeing him fight, him and his wife Nenny, and to be able to make a way for their their family. We see the contrast between them and Jende's employer, Clark, who is, I believe, a broker on Wall Street, and how the financial crash ended up affecting Clark and his family differently than it affected Jende and his family. And we see how there are some privileges that exist for American citizens, and there are some hard choices that immigrants have to face every single day, and the choices that they make. A really interesting look at seeing the perspective of that financial crash, how it affected a lot of people, but how it affected them in different ways. The last book that I read in the month of November is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Shan. So this book is billed as sort of that Mulan meets Song of Achilles-esque story, where a really bold and queer monk ends up going on this journey to become the emperor in this mystical, fictitious land. It was a good attempt at a literary fiction or a literary fantasy where we are seeing that underdog person who in this case, the main character, Zhu Choubang. So again, there's a lot of things that I love in terms of it being that underdog story, that person that rises through the ashes and makes a better name for themselves. There were some things that I didn't really love about this book, but I thought it was a great attempt for a debut novel, and I rated it accordingly. So in terms of the highest and lowest rated books of November, no surprise, The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin was my highest rated book of this month with 5 stars. If I could honestly give this book more than 5 stars, I probably would. It just was amazing. I really truly hope that the trilogy does not make me is not terrible, because I really truly love this book. It's a book that I could see myself reading over and over and over again, and just kind of finding new nuggets and realizing new different things. I truly enjoyed this book, and it deserved every single star of the 5 stars that I gave it. I would say the lowest rated book of this month was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Shan. I rated this 2.75 stars out of 5, and I really wanted to love it so much, but it just missed the mark for me. Again, I thought that there were some parts of the book that were well paced, and then there were a good portion of the book where it just didn't have that pacing that I wanted. It was very slow. We saw it really drag out, and for a action sort of, when you think about like a book where you're having fighting, you don't really see a lot of like those fighting scenes. You don't really get like that, like, if you're telling me a story about war, I'm not getting the full picture of a war, if that makes sense. So there were some things that I thought that the author could have developed a little bit more and could have just maybe picked up the pacing a little bit for this book. So unfortunately, I rated it 2.75 out of 5 stars, which makes it my lowest rated book in the month of November. So for the month of December, unfortunately, we are trending downwards when it comes to number of books. December, I only managed to read 2 books. I'm also recording this a little bit early. Today is December 12th, and I'm specifically recording it on this day because I don't imagine that I'm going to read any new books. I like to spend most of December rereading some of the books that I've read throughout the year, or rereading some older books that I've read in past years. So in terms of new books, this is probably where I'm going to stop. And so I was only able to manage to get 2 books in by the 12th of this month. But the good thing is, both books that I read were fantastic. I loved them. The first book that I read is Her Name is Night, Nina Knight, #1, by Yasmin Anjo. And this is Yasmin's debut novel. And it is a action, espionage, CIA, like it just gives me all of those feels, or gave me all those feels, but with an African twist. We have Nina Knight, who is someone that again is that underdog. Unfortunately, when she was younger, she had a very terrifying event happen where she had all of her family members die. I'm not going to ruin it with how they died, but they ended up all being killed. She has had this grudge on her shoulder to be able to find all of her family's killers and to bring justice to her family. And she ends up finding this woman who is, I guess she's an owner of an agency. They're called The Tribe, and their mission is to uplift Africa through various sources. So they are a group of businessmen and businesswomen, African businessmen and businesswomen, who come together and do some illegal things, here and there to uplift the mission of Africa, to have one unified Africa. And she's a part of this group, and she ends up, fulfilling some of the mission. At one point, she ends up coming across this mission where she sees one of her killers and she has to decide whether she follows protocol and let the man live, or does she take him out. You know what she should. This was one book that I loved. I loved how we got a lot of good character development. Again, there's a great amount of like dual timelines. We're seeing how Nina is dealing with the actual events of how they're happening in real time when she was younger, and then also now, or the present moment. And we see, kind of, scene by scene how Nina says, or does something, and then we immediately go into either the next chapter or the next paragraph and see how the reason why she did that. So something that she did in the present, what is her reasoning or rationale for having done that? And we see that actually play out in the past, if that makes sense. So really, really solid debut novel. And the second or last new book that I am reading in December is In My Dreams, I'll Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. I actually I believe, already released a in-depth review of that book, and I will leave it linked above or in the description below. Guys, all I'm gonna say is that it is a psychological thriller that has all of the things that I love. Beautifully written, fantastic book. She knocked it out the park with this one. I loved this book. So I'm not gonna bore you with the details of that one, but just go ahead and watch that synopsis if you haven't read this book already. So there's only 2 books in this month, and so it's kind of easy to kind of say which is my highest and which is my lowest. So my highest rated book, I have to go with In My Dreams, I'll Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. Rated it 5 out of 5 stars. I saw one major flaw, or one minor flaw, not even any major flaws, and I truly loved this book from start to finish. My lowest rated book, which I don't think it's really fair to say it's my lowest rated, but it's only because I didn't have any other books that I read, so would be Her Name is Night by Yasmin Enjo. I rated this a 4 out of 5 stars. I didn't see too many major flaws, but it didn't pull me in as much as I would say In My Dreams, I'll Hold a Knife. So for that, I rated it just slightly under that book, and so that made it my lowest rated book of the month. All right, so we are at the end. Go ahead and take a sip of water. Congratulations. Whew. I needed that. So I guess at this point I have to figure out which is my favorite book of the quarter. This is so hard because there are so many amazing books that I read this quarter, and a lot of them are debut novels. Like, I am really shocked and excited, honestly, for the future, like where these writers are going to go and what they're going to produce next. I just really found it very hard to try to narrow it down. Like, why do I even do this to myself? What is the point of, I'm probably never going to do this again because this is hard. So if I had to choose, I guess I will go with In My Dreams, I'll Hold a Knife, because it had a lot of the things that I love in a good... Thrillers are probably some of my favorite books, and I rate them very harshly. I'm not like easy on them when I rate them. So if I rate a thriller a 5-star, I'm really into that book. And it had a lot of things that I love in a thriller, and she did them very well. Dual timelines, unreliable narrator, just a hint of romance. Not too much. Just a hint. Fast pacing, misdirection, foreshadowing, but not obvious foreshadowing that you can guess. And it was, again, done exceptionally well. So if I had to choose, I'm really, truly, I keep going. If I had to choose, it would be In My Dreams, I'll Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead as my favorite book of the month of October, November, and December. All right, so folks, that is it. That is my quarterly wrap up, all of the books that I read in October, November, and December of this year. It was a challenge to figure out what was my favorite, but I think I know what it is. In my heart of hearts, I know deep down which one I'm gonna go with. And that is In My Dreams, I'll Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. Have you read any of the books on this list that I have talked about? What did you think about them? I'm really curious to know what your thoughts were. Do you think I rated some really harshly or too harshly? Do you think I gave maybe extra points to some? Really, truly wanna know like the differences between what you thought and what I thought. Let's have a dialogue in the comments down below. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. By doing so, it puts this channel in front of much more people like yourself that love Black, Indigenous, persons of color, women, authors, and stories from those stories about those communities. So would love it and appreciate it if you support this channel by giving it a like and also subscribing if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so that you're notified of every single time that I upload. That is it for me today. I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.